on the 10th of July, alarming symptoms having appeared, and being anxious about the fate of my patient as well as my own reputation, reflecting on the insinuations which had been made to me and the great responsibility attached to the charge of such a patient, I became scrupulously cautious and insisted upon obtaining what I had before most forcibly urged, the necessity of viz. The advice and assistance of other professional men, and for that purpose proposed to call in any of the following medical gentlemen, namely Messrs. Baxter, Stokoe, Livingstone, Henry, and Verling, recommending the two first from their seniority of rank. Napoleon, however, manifested great repugnance to Mr. Baxter, whom he designated as having been chirurgien major d'un régiment dont Sir Hudson Lowe avoir été colonel, et parce qu'il a assisté à la réduction des faux bulletins sans avoir vu le malade. He said he was the major surgeon of a regiment of Sir Hudson Lowe's, and said something wasn't true, and for other reasons, but consisted to see Mr. Stokoe, who was sent for early in the morning. On his arrival, he examined the medical journal of Napoleon's treatment, but being apprehensive of the resentment which might be wreaked upon him if his opinion after seeing Napoleon were not in unison with the views of others, and possessed of too much honor to sacrifice truth to interested motives, he begged leave to decline seeing Napoleon unless in the presence of some other surgeons, specifically chosen by Sir Hudson Lowe. After having attentively considered the journal, however, he gave it his opinion that the complaint was hepatitis and recommended a continuance of the mercurial plan. The same day I was sent for by Sir Hudson Lowe to make verbal reports, the latter having, as soon as Napoleon's complaint assumed a serious appearance, not only prohibited me from making him written ones, but sent back those which I had transmitted to him, but not conceiving myself justified in leaving Napoleon in the alarming state he was then in, I wrote the following letter to Major Goriker, his aide-de-camp, for the information of the governor, who was himself then recovering from a severe fit of illness. Longwood, July 10th, 1818. Sir, the progress of hepatitis with which Napoleon Bonaparte has been affected for some months, having increased in a manner alarming to me, I commenced administering preparations of mercury to him on the 11th of June last, which were continued until the 27th, when, in consequence of effects produced by the humidity of the season, and also perceiving that considerable nervous sensibility and irritability was produced by the use of it, I judged it necessary to discontinue the remedy. But having on the 2nd of July observed that the above-mentioned appearances were ameliorated, I commenced mercurials again, which produced a considerable degree of nervous agitation. And last night especially he was very ill. The morning I was called to see him at 5:30. The valet de chambre finding him in an alarming state, I explained to him as forcibly as I could the necessity of calling a consultation, and proposed to send for the two first medical men of the island, Mr. Baxter, Mr. Stokoe. He manifested a repugnance to call in Mr. Baxter, but he was at last authorized to send for Mr. Stokoe, for which purpose I wrote to him a letter on the spot and awoke Captain Blakeney in order to have it sent. Since that time, I have seen him 3 times and have found considerable debility to prevail. Mr. Stokoe came up about 3 o'clock, not with a view of entering into a consultation or of seeing Napoleon Bonaparte, but to excuse himself on the plea of the responsibility being too great and not wishing to run the risk of getting himself into any scrapes. He had also some conversation with Count Bertrand. My chief reason for calling in Mr. Stokoe was to obtain his opinion relative to the propriety of continuing the mercurial treatment. I am not apprehensive of any immediate danger of his life, and the question hung upon the treatment it was advisable to pursue on one side to guard against the deleterious effects of the remedy upon the delicacies of his organs, and on the other the necessity there was to administer in a manner so as effectually to eradicate the disease. I must therefore beg to remain at Longwood tomorrow, and indeed not to leave it until he recovers from effects chiefly caused by debility and the administration of mercury necessary for the cure of his complaints. I beg you to submit the above for the consideration of the governor, and remain, sir, Barry E. O'Meara, surgeon. Upon the so much extolled climate of St. Helena, I hope the following remarks, founded upon actual observation and experience, will not be deemed superfluous on the present occasion, and to render it more intelligible to the unprofessional reader, I beg leave to offer a few preliminary observations. 2 sudden diurnal vicissitudes of temperature, especially when accompanied with rain or humidity, may be ascribed the greatest part of the diseases which affect the human constitution. Rapid transitions from heat to cold render the extreme vessels on the surface of the body torpid, impelling at the same time a quantity of blood upon some of the internal organs. Sudden atmospherical changes injure by the consent of parts between the exterior and the interior, producing in some climates, such as that of England, affections of the lungs, in tropical ones where the biliary system is so liable to derangement, affections of the liver. The great sympathy existing between the skin, liver, and intestines has never been more strongly characterized than by the number of violent and fatal affections of the 2 latter organs which have occurred and daily occur in St. Helena, where the atmospherical vicissitudes are so frequent and rapid, and where such humidity prevails. The interior of St. Helena is chiefly formed of successions of high, steep, and unequal ridges of hills, the most elevated of which are 2,600 feet above the level of the ocean, divided by deep, narrow, and long ravines, some of which at the bottom are not more than a few feet above the level of the sea. However, therefore, wishes to take a ride of a few miles must calculate on passing through different climates every half hour. One moment becalmed in the bottom of the ravines, he experiences the heat of the torrid zone in a latitude of 15 degrees 55 south. A moment afterwards, crossing the aperture of some chasm, perspiring from every pore, the temporary lull is succeeded by a sudden and bleak blast from the mountains, the effect of which, when combined with the humidity accompanying it, are to produce a rapid evaporation and abstraction of animal heat from the surface of the body, thereby driving the blood from it to the interior. Emerging from the valley covered with perspiration, a similar cutting blast strikes you on reaching the summit of the mountains, producing the same effects.